everyone. Thank you for coming on a Sunday. I know you all have whatever doing. I actually want to start. How many people here have read the book, All Your Perfects? Amazing. How many people cried reading the book? Amazing. I did too. I told you this backstage. My boyfriend took the book away because he thought I was like about to have a panic attack. Is that the intent you go for when you're writing this? Do you want people to cry?
I mean, it's nice. But honestly, every time I finish a book, I think, oh, this one's not so sad. I don't think anybody's going to cry. And everyone's like, oh, it's so sad. I don't really have emotions, so I think the reason why my books are so emotional is because in order for me to feel it while I'm writing it, I just kind of keep pushing and pushing, and then I'm like, oh, that's kind of sad.
Just a touch sad.
Yeah.
Very little sad. Is it hard for you to get into that headspace and then leave that headspace? I mean, it's a heavy topic you kind of tackle here. I think
this one wasn't quite as hard as it ends with us. But I think the reason why I infuse a little humor into all of my books is because I have to stop at a funny part. So if I'm writing a really sad scene, and that's actually why I kind of did the then and now on All Your Perfects, because I needed to read something fun or write something fun after doing, so many sad scenes. So yeah.
Does it stay with you at night? Are you ever waking up in the middle of the night like, oh my God?
No.
Okay, I woke up sad, but that's fine.
I mean, I used to be a social worker and I worked for hospice and I was an investigator for Child Protective Services. And at 5 o'clock, if I wasn't on call, I would just go home and leave it at work. So I guess I have a good personality and attitude to write really sad stuff because it is pretty easy for me to shut it off.
So when you're writing the then and the now, you're weaving between, or are you writing all of the now and then all of the then?
With this book, I wrote from the first chapter to the last. With Ugly Love, I wrote all of the then chapters and then all of the now chapters. It depends on the book. Like every book I write, I have a different process, and that process is really not to have a process.
It works for you, so keep it up. Why did you decide to tackle failing marriage? It's not something you can very much relate to in your own life.
Not yet. I'm just kidding.
Knock on wood, I think I just jinxed it all.
No, it was an interesting topic, and I told my husband, which he doesn't read my books anyway, but I was like, you might not want to read this one because he tried to read Maybe Someday and just couldn't get past the fact that Ridge and Sydney were making music on the bed together and they weren't dating. And he was like, do you think this is okay? And I was like, you have to separate my imagination from my morals, honey. And so this one's one I don't want him to read because he'll be so obsessed about the idea of, oh my God, is our marriage failing? But I actually got the idea for this book because of something. My mother and sister are here. I don't want to spoil it for anyone that hasn't read it, so this isn't like a huge spoiler, but there's a really important box in the book that revolves kind of around their marriage. And my mom made one of these boxes for my sister and her husband at their wedding. And I just thought it was just the greatest idea, but that happened before I became a writer, and I forgot all about it until the 10 years had passed and they opened it, and then I was like, what? I forgot about that. That would make such a good, kind of story. And so I revolved the whole story around that box.
I love that is a true thing that you guys have. That is beautiful and amazing. In general, I feel like a lot of your books do go to darker places. They touch on heavy topics. What attracts you to these heavier narratives?
Well, like I said earlier, I just kind of, in order for me to feel what the characters are going through, I kind of have to go a little darker and more emotional. I never start out a book thinking, oh, I'm going to tackle this subject and, I want to write about this to kind of educate or inform. That's what I try to avoid. I strictly want to write to entertain because that's what I love about reading, and that's the kind of writer I want to be. But I have had a few books lately that kind of took on a heavier tone. So I think just at this moment in my life, that's entertaining for me. And so that's kind of where my books have gone. But I'm in the mood to write a light one after I finish the one I'm working on now, so we'll see what happens. I say that every time, and they're never light.
We talked about this a little bit backstage, but what of yourself do you inject into Quinn and your characters in general? And are you you pulled inspiration from your mom, you said, but is there other people you pull inspiration from?
I try to avoid that. I really try not to write about people I know. I don't want to make anyone mad. And so, but it's really hard as a writer, I think, not to put a little bit of yourself into all your characters. So I think there's a little bit of my sarcasm in all of them. And definitely with Quinn, I feel like had I gone through what she went through, that's how I would have handled it. I'm very bad at communicating with my husband. Luckily, we don't have to communicate much because we get along really well. But, you know, if either one of us were needier people, I think that our marriage would be in trouble, because I like to brush things under the rug. I like to avoid it if it's possible. And I think a lot of people, when they read that book, were like, just talk to him, just talk to her. Yes. And the truth is, like, there are people out there are marriages that fail because they don't know how to communicate. And one thing I think I would communicate by maybe getting everything out in a letter or writing down my thoughts. And my husband doesn't read, he's dyslexic. And so, you know, there would be that barrier, I think, if we went through those kind of issues. But definitely her poor communication skills and Graham's are me.
The whole time I was like, just talk to him, just say something.
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to shake her, grab her by the shoulders.
But if they would have talked it out, there would be no book.
There would be no book. There would also be no movie half the time. There'd be no sitcoms. So
exactly.
Yeah. Going off the now and then theme, looking back at your life then versus now, how has your life changed since you started writing and started getting published?
It's changed exponentially and then not at all, if that makes sense. Like, of course, you know, I get to do what I love, and that is a phenomenal thing. But at the same time, when I'm home, my kids don't give a crap about my career. I'm still mom, you know, like, and it's so great. Like, I love being able to just, you know, that we have, because I was so happy before I started writing, and it's just nothing's changed in that aspect, and especially like where we live, it's, you know, it's not that big of a deal, and everyone's just really supportive and proud of me, but they also don't really care and don't treat me any differently, so it's awesome.
Where do you write? Do you have a room in your house that you kind of lock yourself in? Your kids are like banging on the door like, Mom?
I do. I have an office that I rarely write in. And it's not really my kids so much as my husband. He loves to ask questions. And so, you know, it's just a revolving door. It's breakfast time, and he already figured out what we're going to have for lunch. And he's like, but what are we going to have for dinner? And I'm like, do you really have to open the door to ask me that? So he knows, like, I do my best work when I am absolutely alone. So sometimes I'll go get a hotel room. We have like a camper, and I'll stay in the camper if I'm like really hardcore into it, because my thing is I have to have like 5 or 6 solid days of nothing and no plans, so that I can just really focus and get into that book. And the second I'm pulled out of it, it's really hard to get back into it. And so I will lock myself up every couple of months for like 5 days and just work as hard as I can.
How long does it take you to write something like this?
I used to be faster. I don't know how. But this one, I mean, I worked on it for about a year.
Oh, wow.
But that includes the editing and rewriting. Okay. And so, yeah, they're taking about a year now to do. I was about every 6 months, but I also feel like that was a little too much. And so I just wanted to kind of slow down and put one out a year. Sometimes I can get a little more out than that, but that's where I'm most comfortable.
What are you working on now? Or next, I should say.
Right now I'm working on Verity, which comes out in December. It's different. It's a romantic thriller. And then I am writing a romance that I haven't titled yet also, but that will be 2019.
On the note of titles, where do you come up with them? Do you come up with that before you write the book, or does that come afterwards? It just depends on the book.
I'm trying to think. Hopeless was actually titled Fall Together, and then once I got to the scene where I realized Holder had a sister and it fit in with the title, then I was like, oh, that needs to be the title. Switched everything around. Ugly Love was actually the title for the free book I wrote on Wattpad called Too Late that I never finished, but I loved that title so much that when I wrote Ugly Love, I was like, that would fit really well as I was writing it, and so I stole that title from myself. So it just depends.
Do you ever think back about your characters and you're like, where are they now?
Yeah, occasionally. My mom really does. She asks me a lot, what are Will and Lakin doing?
They're your friends. I feel like you read a book and you're like, oh, those are my friends, and then you finish the book and you're
when
like,
I end a book,
friend.
so I try to end it on like a happy note and just pretend they live together like happily. But it's funny. I think her favorite character probably is Holder, and when when they were building her house, what was it, like 3 years ago that they built it? You know how sometimes you put your names in the concrete? Well, she has this section on her porch where she put all the family's names and then Holders in there.
That's amazing. Is there anyone you would revisit, do a sequel to? I know they get tied up well, but life goes on.
I don't know that I would do a sequel for any of them at this point. I have been very heavily thinking of wanting to write Ian's book, who is from Ugly Love and November 9. I just think it would be fun to kind of, because those books are kind of tied together, to write him a book since he's in both of them. So we'll see how that goes.
I feel like people were excited when you said that.
I heard someone go, mm-hmm.
I heard some nice affirmatives out there. I want to open it up to you guys now. Do you guys have any questions? I know you do, and I know people. Perfect. One right away. Hi. Hey.
So, you may remember that little tiny song, "Girl, You're Perfect." When I was reading it, I really felt like I was an observer.
Does she need a microphone?
No, keep it going.
Okay.
I really felt like I was an observer, like almost like I was standing in a room watching this couple interact and carry on, their marriage. Sometimes feeling like, oh my God, talk to him. Sometimes feeling like, oh my God, grab her and say something. And I just wonder if you kind of felt the same way. Like, did you feel like you were an observer, or did you feel like you were one of them interpreting their marriage?
Her question, did y'all hear that in the back? She asked if when I write a book, do I feel like I'm the character or do I feel like I'm an observer? Absolutely 100% feel like I'm watching this, and I'm watching like it's like a movie. And as I'm writing it, the characters frustrate the hell out of me. They do things that shock me. And definitely in that book, like I was very frustrated at them, but I also knew like, that's their personality. They're just, not very good communicators when it comes to something that raw. And it's almost like when I wrote Slammed, I just remember this very vividly because that was the first book I ever wrote. And in my head, like you had everything planned out when you wrote a book, but I had nothing planned out with that one. And when Lakin went to the school and saw Will in the hallway, I was like, what? I thought he worked at a grocery store. And so things like that happen where like they just throw me for a surprise too. So
do you not outline? Do you just kind of go and like as the words pour out of you?
I do outline, but the final product probably has 2% of the actual outline in it. Like outline for me just helps me come up with ideas. It's not so much, well, this is going to happen in chapter 1, this is going to happen in chapter 2. Outlining for me is more like just developing the characters, some quotes I want in the book, scenes I want in the book, and it just builds from there. I spend probably more time outlining. My outlines end up longer than my actual books end up being.
Fascinating. And only 2% winds up in there.
Yeah, I know. Oh, this one? Really?
I sobbed.
Finally. Finally gotcha.
I was shaking.
Halfway through, I had to put it down and go have a drink and then pick it up.
A lot of people have said that they had to put it down halfway through, and I'm always wondering, which part is that? Is it the car scene? I'm not going into detail. I'm just like, I just can't figure out like which part was it that you were like, oh, I need a break.
The letters for me.
The car scene, yeah.
I mean, that one touched me. Like the same thing with All Your Perfects. It really touched home because the whole situation they're going through, I am going through it. So
I'm
it's
sorry.
like, you know. So
Yeah.
I guess that's what it is. Because when that, I had to leave the book for a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm like, let me just.
Too much.
Yeah, let me just. Yeah, it
You
was.
know, the glass is filling up, and when it got to me, it was like, okay, I got it.
Yeah.
That scene was inspired. I heard there's a band I love, and I'm not talking about the Ava Brothers. I give them a break. The Airborne Toxic Event. There's a song called "Bride and Groom," and I wanted to write a scene that reminded me of that song. So that's where that scene came from. If y'all want to listen to the song.
Back there.
Hi. So my question was, did you always know you were going to write, like maybe when you were in high school or college, like, oh no, I want to write books one day, or I write such amazing books, like how, and second, I guess it's two-part, like where do you get your inspiration from? Like, is there another author that you absolutely love and you're like, you know what, if I write books, I want my books to be like written like those one day and make me feel the way, you know, this author made me feel?
I remember, this is crazy. I remember when I decided I was going to be a writer, and I was 4 years old, and my sister came home from school and she could write our address down, and I was so jealous because, and that's where my inspiration for writing came from, was jealousy of my sister. Because she could write, and I wanted to write, and I wanted to read what she was writing so bad, and I was so frustrated. And I was so excited to start school, and that first day of kindergarten, I came home so disappointed that I didn't know how to read and write yet. I thought it was going to happen when you became a kindergartner. But yeah, I mean, as long as I can remember, I was writing stories. As soon as I think it was in kindergarten when I wrote that one story, Mystery Bob, that Lynn threw away. I'm still bitter, but yeah, I mean, just always wanted to be a writer, loved writing. But when I got to college, you know, that's when, and I had kids early on. I had my first one when I was 20. I actually majored in journalism my first year in college, and realized like, oh wow, I have a family to support now. I don't know that writing is going to be lucrative enough, because you know the average advance for a novel is $10,000, or back then, that when I was Googling everything. And so I changed my major because I didn't think that I could make it a career, and did social work until I was 31. So I was 31 before I decided to give it a shot and write my first book. But yeah, I mean, always that was my dream, was to be an author. And that was like the biggest dream for me. Never even got as far as like hitting the New York Times or anything like that. Like that was insane. So yeah, it's just crazy that I get to do this. And as far as like inspiration from other writers, God, I grew up, Judy Blume was my all-time favorite when I was a teenager, and my first name is Margaret, and I just read that it's going to be a movie, yeah, and so I'm so excited about that. And my favorite teenage movie right now is Edge of 17. The lady who wrote and directed that is doing Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. So that I'm doubly excited because that means it's going to be good. Anyway, so yeah, just growing up, that was my favorite author. Now I think Tiffany de Bartolo is my all-time like contemporary romance author favorite.
If you were to pick one of your books that would be made into a film and had a film adaptation, which one would you pick?
That's a tough one. I don't know. Y'all are saying Ugly Love. I really wanted Ugly Love to happen, so that one would be awesome just because, you know, we were so excited about it. But either that one, or I think Slammed would make a good teenage movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then the other ones, I'm like, oh, that's too sad, that's too sad, that's too sad. I think maybe Someday would be hard just because of the aspect of it. You'd be having to do a lot of, like, reading on screen, so I don't know how they would get that across. But
Anyone else?
I like your shirt.
Thank you. Had it for a couple of years. This is actually a question I wanted to ask you in White Plains when I saw you, and I didn't. Taryn Fisher, I love you. I love Taryn Fisher.
How can you love us both?
I do. Have to read everything you guys write.
Who do you love more?
I'm gonna say you.
If you
right
had
now,
to
'cause
pick.
you're in front of me. But I wanted to know how you guys wrote Never Never together, and if you plan on doing anything in the future.
Okay, so Never Never is a funny story. Huh? Oh, she wanted to know how Taryn and I wrote Never Never together and will we be doing anything else. That's a funny story because I got the idea for the first chapter right when I started writing, and Taryn was one of my first author friends, and we were chatting one day about book ideas, and I was like, I want to write this YA book, but it's very different from what I normally write. And I told her the first chapter, what I wanted to happen in the first chapter, where Charlie just kind of wakes up in the middle of the class, doesn't remember anything. Was that me? I'm sorry. And
I wasn't gonna say anything.
and she loved the idea, and so for like 3 or 4 years, she just went on every time. She'd always be like, "Have you written the first chapter? Have you wrote that book yet?" And one day she sent me the first chapter. She was like, "I wrote it for you. Now finish it." She just wanted that story so bad. And so then I wrote the second chapter from the guy's point of view and emailed it back to her, and she wrote the third. And we did that for about 5 chapters before we were like, oh, we should put this out there. This is fun. And that's how we wrote it. We knew the ending of the series and the beginning, but we just kind of went back and forth. And because we're best friends, we kind of would try to trip each other up and end on a way that would make it difficult for her to start the other chapter. She would talk about Coke a lot, and I would talk about Pepsi a lot, and it was a fun writing experience. But also, I don't know that we would do another one together. And if we did, we wouldn't announce it. I think that's the mistake we made with that book, was kind of put pressure and a timeline on ourselves. So we would just put it out there and be like, surprise. But, she just had a baby, and it's going to be a while before she can be prolific as she was.
Hi. I have a question. Did you ever not like one of the characters that you wrote? Because I don't like Quinn. I like your story, but I don't like her.
Yeah, I honestly don't like her very much either. There were times I was frustrated, but then there's the opposite spectrum where a lot of people were like, I hate Graham. I feel so bad for Quinn. So I think it depends on if you've ever been in that situation. I got most of the feedback from people that are like, I am Quinn, are people that went through exactly what she's gone through. So I think it is kind of hard to relate to how you would react to something that devastating. But oh yeah, there's a lot of characters I hate, like Asa from Too Late. I don't even really like Warren or Bridget from Maybe Someday. In real life, I don't know that I could hang out with either of them.
Are they from the worst parts of your brain that you try to avoid? Because you're
Asa's from the worst part of my brain. Yeah. He was my favorite character to write, though. I don't know what that says about me.
Hi, I have 2 questions for you. The first was, have you ever written a book and then gotten a few chapters in and realized you've taken it down a path you don't like and then feel like you have to go back and start over? And then my second question is, you've clearly found your passion and found something you love in writing. What advice would you have for people who are maybe still looking for that type of passion?
Answer to the first is yes, absolutely. I probably have, for every book, a vast array of the first 5 chapters of every book I've ever written. With this one that I'm writing now, I have 10 first chapters. And so I'll start a book and then be like, oh no, I need to start over. It's a process. It just doesn't come. I can get to the end of the book and be like, oh, well, take Ugly Love, for example. I wrote that whole book and there wasn't even a character named Cap. He wasn't even in the first draft. I went back, I was like, Tate needs a friend. So I gave her an 80-year-old friend. But yeah, definitely. And then advice for new writers, is that what you said, the second one?
Not just for new writers, but in general,
Finding your passion. I would say go into it wanting to keep it your passion and don't have any expectations beyond that, because with writing, like, it's always been my passion. I've always loved it. I've always written stories for fun. And I honestly had zero expectations with this career. And I think going into it, if none of this were to happen, if no one would have ever read my first book, I think I would have been fine with that, because I was just so excited about writing a book. But I think if you go into it thinking, oh, I'm going to be able to, do my passion and do it for the rest of my life and make a lot of money off of it, you're going to get jaded and it's not going to be your passion anymore. So if you want it to remain your passion, just, have fun with it and don't put expectations on yourself. I'm not saying don't have goals. Definitely have goals. But you just don't want to be disappointed. Oh, am I calling people? I think they're doing it. I'm sorry, or I would say y'all.
Hi. So for All Your Perfects or for any other book, did you have like an alternate ending for each of them, or for like All Your Perfects, was that like the solid ending?
No, All Your Perfects actually had a completely different ending that my editor loved and did not want me to change, but I didn't feel good about it, and so we just had a conversation about it, and she ultimately agreed that maybe the alternate ending was the best ending to go with. And I wish I could say what that was. Let's just say it ended in a completely different way and they got what they wanted. And then it made me think I know y'all are like, oh, but it would defeat the purpose of their struggle and their marriage. And it almost, to me, felt like had I written It Ends With Us, and they would have ended up different in the end. Like, he would have suddenly Raoul would have overcome his issues. It's just not realistic, and it doesn't happen for everyone, and I kind of wanted to keep it that way and not really do the whole romantic happy ever after thing. That's not a spoiler, but just see. Hopefully most of y'all have read it. It's been out several months.
I have to use a microphone. I feel like I sound so weird. Sometimes you write from a female perspective and sometimes a male perspective. Is one of those easier for you, or do you prefer to write one over the other? Like, how do you choose what to do? I
don't know that either is easier. I don't know that I do it perfectly, but I feel like especially in this genre, when we write from a male perspective, we write in a way that we, as women, hope men think, But if we really wrote how they actually think, we'd probably all be a little disappointed. And, science says what they think about 90% of the time. But I enjoy both. Like I said, Asa's character was my absolute favorite character to write from. I have recently been doing mostly just one point of view female books. I don't know why. To me, when I read, I kind of like to not know what every character is thinking. And so that's just kind of been the kick I've been on lately.
Hi. I just want to say thank you, because I was actually one of the few people that got to go to Book Bonanza this year, so you were my best 2018 memory, and you too, Lynn. I was the one with the unicorn horn. So I just wanted to ask, what was because I know you had a lot of anxiety prior to the whole signing, and you were a beast, by the way, signing 600. I don't know how you have carpal tunnel right now, because you were a beast, but what was your best memory? Like, who, besides E.L. James, who was your favorite person to meet? Because besides you guys and the volunteers, you guys
That's
were
a good
amazing.
question. I honestly think prior to Book Bonanza, I'd met most of the authors. We're this genre is huge, but we do so many signings that we kind of run across and meet, all of them. And I don't know that it was meeting a person that was the best moment. I think it was Saturday night when it was over. Yeah, and we got to do the concert, and everyone was happy. And I will say my favorite aspect of Book Bonanza was definitely the one I'm proudest of, is that we did that resolution center with Lynn and Murphy as the unicorns, because it just helped so much. It helped everyone to have somewhere to go if they had an issue, and I think that helped a lot with the morale of the whole thing. 'Cause it was crazy. It was a crazy big event, especially since it was our first one, and next one's going to be even crazier. But it was just far exceeded my expectations.
Lynn, did you ever find your phone?
Did you find your phone, Lynn?
Wallet.
Your wallet, right?
Yeah, it was in the restaurant for 4 days. And the waitress brought it to the front desk. My husband overnighted my passport for no reason.
I know.
Can we get these two ladies questions? They've had their hands raised the whole time.
Hi.
Hey.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. First time meeting
Are you Southern?
No, I'm not. I'm from the Bronx, so we kind of have like a little bit.
What?
I heard it too. I was like, yeah.
How are you?
We sometimes have like a Southern accent. So.
Wow.
Yeah. Just a general question that I like to ask authors. From any of your books, whether it be this book or any of your past ones, what has been your favorite, like, if you read reviews, your favorite good review and your favorite bad review?
Oh, that's a good question. What's been my favorite good review and my favorite bad review? Favorite good review? What, you're looking at me like I should know this.
Oh, she's looking at me. She's
definitely,
looking at me.
definitely.
She's telling you to look at me.
Yo, it's amazing. Like, I love, especially going on Goodreads, because I know a lot of authors hate Goodreads because there are a lot of terrible reviews there. But if you filter it all out and just put it on 5 stars, you think everyone loves you. And it's amazing. And so I go on there all the time. If you think authors don't read their reviews, a lot of them maybe don't. I do, but I usually just read the good ones. My favorite bad one was on Slammed, and this lady accused me of plagiarizing a 1962 episode of Gidget. And had the episode number and everything. She was like, this author obviously watched this episode and wrote this book. And I always meant to go back, but now there's so many reviews I can't ever find it, because I wanted to watch that episode to see like what I did. But no, I don't know. There's just so many reviews that mean so much to me. Like, it's just really hard to. In the beginning when I wrote Slammed, I kept a scrapbook, because I thought, nothing was going to come of it after that. I printed out every single review. And I have this scrapbook with like the first 200 reviews that I got that year. And then I ended up quitting because it was taking up a lot of time, because my career just kind of took off. And so yeah, they mean a lot.
If you woke up tomorrow and you couldn't be a social worker and you couldn't be a writer and you didn't have to worry about money, what would you do?
I would be a director. I want to direct a movie so bad. I would probably be terrible at it because I'm very bad with detail, but it'd be interesting.
Be something, that movie.
Yeah.
One more question. This person in the back.
Who gets it?
Hey.
Swap lives with any of my characters? Oh, God. I mean, so much drama. My life is drama-free. Probably Tate. She got a husband who could take her anywhere in the world, and that would be fun. Yeah, Tate. Or Asa. Just kidding. Just kidding.
Do you read any books at all while you write, or do you have downtime to read?
I actually have slowed down on reading a whole lot because of the career, but I cannot read a book while I'm actively writing a book. It gets in my head, and then I'm like, why? How am I an author? This person is so smart, yeah. And so I just get all depressed and think I can't do it, and so I wait until I'm done with the book, and then that's when I will, start on my TBR pile.
What are you currently reading or just read? Because I know you are.
I just finished a book from Tiffany DeBartolo, my favorite writer. It's going to be a while before it's out. She hasn't even sold it to a publisher yet, but it's called Sorrow. and it was so good. Shoot, let me beta read it. That's so awesome. Like, get to beta read for your favorite author. That's my favorite part of this career.
I love that. I agree with you. I think that is all the time we have for questions.
Thank you.
Thank you guys all for coming.
Thank you all so much.